Some Democrats praising the Trump administration for issuing new sanctions against Russian and Chechen officials who are allied with Putin for alleged corruption and human rights violations. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey told the Daily Beast website the sanctions are a, quote, good sign and a good step in the right direction. And Bloomberg News reports a spokesman for President Putin told the media Kremlin officials are concerned about potential new sanctions from the U.S. That spokesman saying relations between the two countries are already rather pitiful and further tension could be, quote, unbearable. Let's bring in Ested Herndon. He's a national politics reporter for the Boston Globe. Ested, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Kind of strange to hear Russia, Democrats, and praise in the same sentence.
It certainly is unique in the look at the scope of the last couple of years. Democrats have been relentless in their criticism of President Trump and his relationship with Russia. But this was a fairly unique step. We had the Trump administration expand sanctions under that Magnitsky Act, which has been a high tension point between us and between America and Moscow. And so when you had that expansion, you saw Democrats, you saw bipartisan praise for the Trump administration in this particular area. The problem is that this has been kind of a Jekyll and Hyde approach from the Trump administration. On one hand, you have these kind of expanded sanctions, but we have not seen that rhetoric and that cohesive rhetoric of on the issue of Russia to flow throughout officials, and that's what critics of the administration are still looking for.
You mentioned the Magnitsky Act. Easy for you to say, not for me. Under that act, the White House sanctioned 5 Russian and Chechen individuals for these human rights abuses. That froze their assets. It banned them from getting visas. And as you said, it's sort of a conflict or a surprise to some.
To some, it is a surprise. I mean, this has been a crucial point that has come up multiple times in the last year. Remember, Moscow retaliated against this act by banning or limiting American adoption of Russian officials, which ended up coming up later and was a part of the questions of what Donald Trump Jr. was meeting with Russians about in that fateful Trump Tower meeting. So we have seen this Magnitsky Act. We have seen the issue of Russian adoptions come up over and over. And so when you have this action where the administration is expanding the amount of people who are affected under that, that was a surprise to some people, and it caused praise because you've seen Democrats want and even some Republicans want the Trump administration to be a little tougher and a little more consistent on how they're treating Moscow and Putin.
Well, should we take this as a signal in the direction that the White House might be moving in Russia-U.S. relations?
It could be a sign of growth, but we would have to see that continue for a little bit. We've had these moments when it seems like the White House has made a turn on this issue, but then they could go back. Remember, we saw the president when asked about Putin and his history of human rights violations. Certainly, we have another questionable incident with this banning of an opposition leader. The president said that maybe, the U.S. isn't so good also, and that's been something that's stuck with people. So maybe this is a sign of growth from this White House, but we would also have to see that be reflected from Secretary of State, the ambassador, and of course the president himself.
What more do you know about this opponent who's not being allowed to run?
Now, I only know from the reporting that I have also seen, and we have seen both independent analysts and supporters of this person say that this was a more serious candidate to President Putin. But what we do know about Putin is that he has been historically very tight and restrictive on opposition from both independent journalists and media members, but also of opposition political opponents. And so this is certainly in line with his authoritarian or leaning authoritarian history. And so that's why critics are sounding real serious alarms.
The president and Putin have seemed to get along during their interactions. And the president made the point that it was in our best interest to have a good relationship with Russia.
Certainly, and I think that there's a lot of people who agree with him. The U.S. and Russia relations through presidents going back the last couple have been very fraught, and President Trump has made clear that he thought that this was an arena which he could make strides, in which he could improve U.S.-Russia relations and see some growth in that area when there are real serious challenges, when there are challenges in North Korea, when there's real national security issues for the United States. Where the critics say, and what the people who have been questioning him say, is at what cost is that coming? Is Russia coming, meeting us halfway, or is America doing the bulk of the giving there? And so that's where that tension comes from.
My critics also say that it's in the president's best interest to be tougher on Russia because of this ongoing investigation into possible collusion with Russia.
Yeah, and that's all what's looming over this. I mean, we have this issue, which is certainly a policy issue, a national security issue, but then we have the separate question of the ongoing special counsel investigation into whether there was possible collusion or interference in the American election. And so that is what is coursing through all of these questions, was there, and certainly there have been lots of opinions about this, was there collusion between members of possibly the Trump campaign? And those are things that the special counsel is working through. And so throughout all of these policy questions, you have the politics, which is a different thing, and whether the White House would want to appear tougher on Russia, specifically because there's this very serious investigation ongoing.
It certainly appears that Putin will be in office for at least another 6 years based on his most powerful opponent being taken out of the race.
That much seems clear, and it also seems clear that Moscow was very concerned about the expansion of the folks limited by the Magnitsky Act as well.
Estet Herndon, we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.